Jumbo,
Jumbo.
welcome. You are joining us on Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. We're coming to you on Black Power Media Reloaded, and we're glad to be on this platform that brings these matters of critical importance to our people. My name is Inez Barron, and I am co-host of Operation Power, along with my husband, the bold, the outspoken, the indomitable, the one, the only, the unbought, and the unbossed.
Charles Barron, and as I say each and every week, the humble servant. And I am so honored and pleased always to be on with the love of my life, my wife of 43 years. As you can see, the stunningly beautiful,
Thank you.
the intellectually brilliant Inez Barron.
Thank you so much. Well, once again, you're listening to Operation Power, you're viewing Operation Power, and we've got an exciting topic for you today.
Yes.
We're calling it Strange Fruit. Slavery and lynching never ended. Strange fruit. We're going to have an exciting guest, none other than Professor James Small, who's been with us on several occasions before and is going to lead us in a discussion on that topic. But first, we want to acknowledge the fact that we understand that we are where we are in our journey in the liberation struggle because of the sacrifices of our ancestors, those who've gone before, many of whom's names we do not know, but those who have gone before and made sacrifices, led the way, and brought us to this point and passed the torch to us. So we do want to play a video, a libation video. We're going to ask our engineer, Kiru Gichiru, if he would play that video at this time.
For African people, nothing important happens without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on their skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation. I shave. Pour libation too to them, because they then began to teach each other. They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became the new Africans wherever they were. They became the new teachers, preachers, archaeologists, the new singers, dancers, the new drummers, the new Jaliyah. They reconstructed that history and our culture and became new Africans everywhere. So to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe. Pour libation too.
Asheo.
Asheo.
And we invite you to reflect and think on your own ancestors who've made sacrifices in your families and in your communities to move us to where we are. And invite you to make sure that you're doing your part, pick up the torch and carry it, and be a model for our children who are coming behind us. Well, once again, this is Operation Power, and we have a brief video that we want to share with you, which gives you some of the highlights of Operation Power, talks a little bit about our history and some of our accomplishments.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Thank you so much. So a little bit of what we've done. We are located in the East New York section of Brooklyn, and we consider ourselves to be a grassroots organization because we realize that all politics starts locally and moves from there. We do want to highlight several books. I want to bring them to your attention. The first one is called Speaking Truth to Power, and it is written by our leader of the Operation Power organization, Charles Barron, and it is a collection of articles and essays that have been written over the years, and we invite you to get it. It's very easy reading, and as I said, it's a collection of articles, so you can pick the section that you want to start with. The next book we want to highlight is called It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. It is written by Malika Jabali, and it talks about what capitalism is and how it has manifested itself across the world. The next is actually a novel. It's written by Kevin Barron, and the title is Black Rising. It's a page turner. Once you start it, you won't put it down. And that is a part of a trilogy. And the second book in the trilogy is Black Rising, Home and Abroad. And it continues the theme and the characters introduced in the first volume. And the third book in the series is called The Threat. So we invite you to get those books. You can get them online at Barnes and Nobles, and we believe that they will be very enlightening to you. Well, we're here. We have a segment which we have recently added to our program, and we call that segment Habari Gani. Habari Gani is a phrase in Swahili, and it means, what's the news? What's happening? What's going on in our community? You might hear, what's up? And what we just want to do is briefly highlight some of the situations that are going on across the country. And today in our Habari Ghani section, we're going to talk about the fact that on August the 11th, there were terrible storms, deadly storms in There's our drum to get your attention for the Habari Ghani section. We know that drums get your attention, and we want to just introduce it with those drums. But we want to talk about the fact that in Gary, Indiana, there was a terrible storm on August the 11th, and it affected several areas in Indiana, not just Indiana. Several sections were affected by that storm. And for 2 weeks, Gary, Indiana had no electricity. There were other areas that were had the electricity turned on gradually, but Gary, Indiana, which you may know, is predominantly Black. 80% of the people who were there are Black. For 2 weeks, had no electricity, no food, no gas, no water, no banking opportunities, no lights at all. Whether if they only had what they had in their homes, be they lanterns or flashlights. And it was devastating. And it didn't get much national attention during the time that it was occurring. So it wasn't until yesterday that it was declared a federal major disaster area. So for 2 weeks, people have been subjected to that kind of condition. And it was a private utility company that is responsible for restoring this. And people are saying, well, this is a company that came in recently and they're looking to get more land so that they can increase the number of data centers that are being brought into Indiana. A data center takes as much electricity as approximately 20,000 homes. And we can question whether or not the emphasis is going to be on getting electricity to the data centers or to the homes. So you want to make sure that you also recognize that it was August 29th, 2005, that Hurricane Katrina made landfall and devastated. It was deadly as well and took the lives of many people. And it wasn't until 5 days later that supply trucks came and brought food and water to the condition. So there's a parallel there. And we know that when we have these kinds of disasters, it's the low-income areas where Black people are found, where Black people are located, and they've been subjected to all of the redlining and all of those circumstances that make them vulnerable. So we just want to make those parallels.
I'm just reading some of our listeners or viewers were saying, even though they didn't have electricity, they still got bills. They still had to pay electric bill. No power, but still got their bills sent to them. And also, as so many people died on the roofs in New Orleans, the failure of FEMA, and it really doesn't matter which president, which party is in office, when it comes to these kinds of disasters, it is the Black community that suffers. So people are sending all of their prayers and material support to our people in Indiana. And remember, that's the historic place where the National Black Political Convention took place in Gary, Indiana, 1972. Yes. So we owe a debt to Gary. Send your support.
Thank you so much. Well, that concludes our Habari Ghani section, and we're going to move now to our major topic and our guest. And we want to make sure that we acknowledge Professor Small. He's been on with us many times before. He is a scholar, he's an instructor, he's a professor, and he is served as the International Vice President of the World African Diaspora Union, and he was the past president also of the Eastern region of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. He's a great friend of ours, and we do want to bring him on with a musical piece, and we're going to use Strange Fruit.
Strange Fruit was sung by Billie Holiday many, many years ago. And this song that she talks about graphically about lynching that was going on, it was the song that destroyed her career. Once she began to talk about lynching, she was attacked by the system. I mean, they were lynching us. She was just mentioning it, and yet she got attacked. But the version that we want you to hear, the powerful rendition by Nina Simone.
Southern trees, barren, strange fruit, blood on the leaves, and blood at the roots. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South. Them big bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Scent of magnolia, clean and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck. For the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot.
Strange Fruit, and that's happening today. So we're going to be talking about slavery never ended. Everybody knows that the 13th Amendment said slavery shall be abolished except as a punishment for crime. We went from the plantation to the penitentiary, because what capitalism always wanted was our labor, free labor and no wages. That's what they wanted. So we're going to be talking about how slavery never ended. And also, we're going to be talking about lynching. And you know, we generally don't like to focus on a lot of negativity, but it's so pervasive now. We got to address it and talk about solutions before the show is over, and which is why we got Dr. Small. But they were about 4,000 lynchings from 1800s to like 1950, 1877 to 1950. There were 4,000 lynchings. In the year 2000, there were 8,000 lynchings. And last year, 2025, there's a lynching. And this year, 2026, a sister was lynched. And what do they say? The same thing they said in South Africa when they found us hung in cells, and they found people jumped out of the windows in South Africa. They said it was suicide. Nobody believes that. So we're going to let Dr. Small come in now and lead us in this discussion about the fact that strange fruits still exist.
Yes, good evening, my beautiful family of revolutionaries. Y'all are so consistent, and that's such a good model and example for our people. Brother Charles and Inez Barron. I don't know what to say. Your consistency over decades in struggling with principle at your forefront for the revolutionary freedom of African peoples and people in general worldwide, but at the forefront of your struggle have been in the African community here in the Americas and particularly here in New York City. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the work that you're doing, because people sometimes don't understand. And that's why you got to go all the way back to Dessalines, whose birthday is coming up very soon.
Yes.
And he said, freedom or death.
That's right.
Nothing in between. Freedom or death. And you've certainly been a model of that stance. You've worked in state government, you've worked in city government, and you never compromised. You set a model for other Black politicians, and they weren't paying attention. You showed that we can be in this government, we can serve the interests of the people, we can serve the interests of the impoverished, and we don't have to compromise our principles.
That's right.
You know? So when I see others saying, well, you know, in order to get this bill passed, I got to do this. Well, I need to vote in the alliance of this. You've proved that that's not true.
That's right.
And so I just want you to know I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
I've been on this show before, and I was actually going to recite the words from Strange Fruit, but you brought Nina on, and she laid it out, and people don't know the FBI and the State Department hounded and eventually murdered great Billie Holiday while she was chained to a hospital bed, right? Because of this song. They wanted her to stop singing it, and she wouldn't stop. Because it wasn't just the song. She was a messenger of that day. She was a conscious activist messenger, and she used music to instruct and inform our people about the political conditions we were under. And lynching, which you've laid out, Brother Barron, they don't even know how many of us were lynched. None of us know.
That's right.
They guessed between 1882 and 1968, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. But we know the number is greater than that because most was never reported.
That's right.
There's nobody who dare reported it. One of the strongest advocates we had that dared report it was Ida B. Wells.
B. Wells, that's right.
You know? And they drove her out of the South. They blew up her office and tried to assassinate her multiple times. But she went all around the world, even in Europe, to push the cause of the genocide and the murder that they call lynching. And I was just looking at a definition that they gave, and the definition says that a lynching is the public killing of an individual who has not received any due process. And these executions are often carried out by lawless mobs, though police officers did participate under the pretext of justice all across the country. Is that lynchings were violent public acts that white people use to terrorize and control Black people in the 19th and 20th and right into the 21st century. Particularly in the South, lynchings typically evoke images of Black men and women hanging from trees. And then they talk about Sister Holiday taking that message forward. But people don't understand that white terrorism is an extension of the capitalist state. It isn't something arbitrarily on the side. Government encourage and support and participate with the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Councils and the other terrorist organizations. And it wasn't always organizations. It was the general white community. And they came from around the country to attend lynchings, bringing their children, wearing their Sunday best, coming with their baskets like it was a picnic, to watch men and women.
That's right.
African American community being murdered ceremonially, so that they could feel like they themselves, who were victims of their own capitalism, want to feel like they was a step off from us. They were next to the capitalist boss. And thus, they had the opportunity to maybe rise into the ranks.
Mhm.
So they maintain that position even today. Even today, that's the class position of the general white population.
Mhm.
And we will protect capitalism because there's an opportunity for us to become the capitalists.
That's right.
And that may sound oversimplified, but that's generally what we're seeing. And the deification of Black people by saying that, oh, these people were over-sensual, these people were raping white women, oh, they're robbing our stores. And we were the primary workforce in the country working for no salaries.
That's right.
Even when we were in that period after the Civil War, between 1865 and 1965, which they call sharecropping and Jim Crow, people don't understand how that worked. We were sharecropping, meaning we were on the land that they claimed to own, and we were planting crops. We had to buy the seeds from them, rent the equipment from them, get our daily meals from them. So at the end of the year, when we brought the crop in, we were still in debt. So we got no compensation. That was slavery by any other name.
That's right.
Okay. And believe it or not, sharecropping is still going on across the South today. You know? And we're not paying attention because history, I would say history erases the mystery. And some people think history is a benign tool, but no, history is a tool that will prepare the consciousness to take revolutionary action. If you don't know the history, you don't even know what the causes are that you have to take actions on. You don't understand. Who's the crime committer? Who's committing the crime? You will begin to think you're the criminal. And what this country have done from its inception is criminalize the working class, okay? From its very inception. And it still does that. It criminalized the very people that they deliberately impoverish.
Yes.
And then what happens, and I think Sister Joy DeGree talks about this in her book, Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome, is that it then gets the victim to think they're the problem.
Exactly.
And begin to turn on one another, which we do almost daily in our communities across the country, across the world, really, because this strategy.
K-Root, we've lost, we can't hear Professor Small. Is that something on our end?
My sound went off. I had a piece of paper sitting there.
Okay.
That's very sensitive. I didn't know it could do that. But what I was trying to say is that, you know, what we're calling race violence and what we saw as lynchings that killed so many thousands of our people and are killing our people today is an extension of the capitalist economic structure.
Right. That's right.
It is almost necessary for them to use that tool to terrorize that population, particularly in America, the African American population, that fight against the system structure. But we don't see it because they confuse us in thinking, by criminalizing us, thinking that we are the problem, that the attack on us by the general white population is appropriate in defending the white system of dominance that we label and know appropriately as capitalism. And we find ourselves today, I was looking at the list of the young people that we've lost just in the last few months. And it would probably due to, and every time I try to get them, they say they don't want their names called, but they need to be brought out and show that this thing called lynching is still going on today, right here in the United States. And we've lost something like just in the last 3 months that we know about 8 to 10 brothers and sisters that have been found hanging from somewhere, or found dead in the woods with no explanation. And all of this is referring to as suicide. Every one have been claimed a suicide. just probability and statistics tell you that don't make sense, because that is not the trend in the young Black community. And most of these young people were college-educated young people or students in universities around the country. And if you look at the history, most of them were people who were standing up and challenging the status quo. And so we have to be aware that lynching wasn't just the thing that happened with the Ku Klux Klan. Matter of fact, most of the lynchings was not done by the Klan. It was done by the sheriff's office, the police department, the general population around whatever community. And it usually was happening to Black people because they wanted to take their property away from them. They wanted, or it was someone who resists the tyranny in that community, and they wanted to punish them for resistance, men and women. But in most cases, it was to destroy the communities we have built. We built over 500 free African communities after the Civil War.
That's right.
And nearly to the community, it was terrorized and destroyed. And lynching was one of the main weapons used, and just plain attack by weapons, by mobs and hordes, and almost always led by the law enforcement instrument in that community at the time.
Dr. Small, and I want to talk a little bit about what we did. There were groups like the Deacons of Defense.
Oh, yeah.
There were groups like the Black Panther Party, and there were all kinds of rebellions. And
we have always resisted.
Right. So talk a little bit.
Like, you know, sometimes people talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it made it look like we just ran away. But no, there was a group of brothers and sisters who had fought in the First World War. They called themselves the Blood Brotherhood.
Yep.
Were actually formed here in New York. And when things before the riots by the whites started in Oklahoma, they saw this thing coming, and they moved the bulk of their troops to Oklahoma. And that was the group that was resisting the Black Blood Brotherhood. So we didn't just start organizing against tyranny. Every community that we've ever built in this country, we defended it with our lives.
That's right.
Okay. We were often overwhelmed by the numbers and by law enforcement and by the tools, the weaponry that they brought with them in these occasions, but there've never been an occasion where we didn't resist and rebel to death. Going all the way back to the Florida Fort Moses, okay,
that's right.
And the Everglades.
That's right.
During slavery, we fought 3 wars against this country, and we won them. The first 2 outright, the third, and we fought one with the British before that. And the third was a standoff, and that's when we were given the opportunity to go to Oklahoma Territory, which was supposed to be the Black territory.
That's right.
There was even a bill before Congress to make it that, but it never got out of committee. But Black folks went to Oklahoma, but about 50% went to Mexico, because Mexico had already abolished and in the process of abolishing slavery under its second president, who was an African Mexican. You know, and the place is still named after him today. We have always resisted. We are resisting now. This show is a form of resistance.
This is a good time to talk about it, because this is Black August, the month of resistance.
Yes.
I want you to talk a little bit about Robert and Maybelle Williams, because he and his wife Maybelle had NAACP, but they took it to another level.
Right.
When you
Brother Rob Williams, who had served, like I served in the American military, and I came home, and the first thing I did was join the old AAU. You know what I'm saying? And before I know it, I was Ella's bodyguard and fully locked and loaded, and been trained how to use both the locked and the loaded. And so did many other brothers. But Rob Williams has served in the American Marine Corps, and he came home to his community, and he served as a leader in the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina. But when he saw the tyranny against his people straight up front, he had seen it like most of us grew up in the South all of our life, and we resisted it all of our life, but he took it to the next level. He created armed organization. It wasn't just him and his wife that organized. He organized the Black community. And because of that, he was forced to leave this country and, of course, go in exile into China. But he set the standard for resistance during the period of the 60s. The Deacons for Defense, they weren't playing.
No, no.
It only took brothers who had served in the military, knew weaponry, knew how to use weaponry, and could train others how to use weaponry to be their frontline soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even get mentioned in the historical medium of America.
That's
Yet
right.
those were the people protecting Dr. King and the others. They were protecting the Freedom Riders. Those people weren't just out there walking.
That's right.
It was some men and women who was armed to the T, knew how to use those arms that was protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a myth about the benign attitude of blacks in the South. I grew up in South Carolina in the Rice Belt. My 15th birthday, I got a 22 pump rifle. That's my birthday gift. My 16th birthday, because I had to go back and forth to town and hitchhike over 2 rivers, I got a 2-shot Derringer and 2 boxes of bullets for my 16th birthday. And I wasn't the only one in that community. Our people understood we weren't benign, foolish people sitting there shaking because of white folks. Matter of fact, in many instances, white folks shook because of us.
That's right. That's right.
So we need to tell our people resisting and armed resistance in this country never cease.
That's right.
From the time we stepped off of those boats. When we look at Denmark Vesey, we look at Nat Turner, we look at the Haitian Revolution, and those are the ones they put up front. There were many other rebellions. I think they list something, Apdecker and his,
a whole bunch of
list hundreds of armed rebellions in the United States of America by the enslaved African population.
And you know,
it is those rebellions that led to the abolition of slavery, because they realized we can't maintain this system with people resisting in this manner.
We lost
one piece, Brother Charles. At the height of that resistance was the more than 400,000 of us who picked up arms in the Civil War that they don't even talk about. They talk about the Massachusetts 54th, but they were tens of thousands of us fighting in South Carolina before the 54th, fighting in Mississippi before the 54th. And so we need to raise all these questions that we never stopped resisting.
That's right.
We never shied away from using weapons to meet violence with violence. That's just common sense, and we've always had common sense.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted you to talk a bit about the Stono Rebellion, the 1811 New Orleans rebellions in New Orleans. Just stretch on that a little bit.
Well, let's start with the Stoner Rebellion. Before the New Orleans 1811 Rebellion, the Stoner Rebellion was one of the largest in North America. But a few years before the Stoner Rebellion, there was a New York Rebellion. Because at that point, New York had the largest enslaved population in America. And I think close to about 10 years before the Stoner Rebellion, we literally burnt New York down.
That's right.
You know? And then we get to the Stoner Rebellion in South Carolina, which is near where I grew up, where in the down there by the Stoner River, outside of Walterboro, near Charleston, South Carolina. These brothers and sisters broke away, and the first thing they did was went for the warehouses where the guns were.
That's what they did.
And they got the guns and they armed themselves. And they began to march towards Florida, because the Spanish says, any black that makes it to Florida, you're free. And they said, okay, that's a bet. We're going to round up our people and we're going to go. And so the brother, his name is something called Cato, who's one of the leaders. He was captured and executed along with a few others, but most of them made it to Florida and became a part of that nation that we get to know later as the Seminole Nation. And the word, and I want to correct people, there is no history of a Seminole Indian or Native American tribe in America. Seminole come from the Spanish word Cimarron, which means runaway slave. Okay. Now, they married into the Creek Indians. The not just any Creek, the larger Creek nation was working with the Southern planters, helping to track us down. But there was a smaller Creek nation called the Red Tail Creeks. And they allied with us 100%. Matter of fact, the chief of that nation was married to an African woman, you know. And so when we study our history, from the beginning, we resisted. We never let this thing be that we accepting this as slavery. Matter of fact, I don't think any of our people call themselves slaves.
That's right.
That's not how they saw themselves. They saw themselves as African human beings coming from free community, had been terrorized and set upon by other people. And so we resisted. And when we get to 9/11, I mean, I'm 17, but that's 1811.
1811, right?
1811 in the New Orleans area, which is considered one of the biggest of all
That's
of
right.
the slave rebellions. This is after the Haitian Revolution,
That's right.
and this is after the death of Dessalines.
That's
See,
right.
after the death of Dessalines, a lot of and the French and the mulattoes took over Haiti with the Catholic Church. Many people left and came to New Orleans. Okay, these were Dessalines people.
That's right.
And they left there because the system was trying to destroy them. And so they merged with the population in New Orleans and launched in 1811 the largest slave rebellion in North America. And though they were overwhelmed by federal troops and state troops and local policemen who was armed, they destroyed many plantations and took out a lot of the white terrorists that ran those plantations before they met their destruction.
As a matter of fact, I heard that they were knocking on the door to New Orleans. Their goal was to set it up as a black state, and they got this close.
They were there, but faith didn't allow that.
Yeah,
but what they did, that's one of the things that scared the country so much. They began to try to figure out, how do we rearrange slavery, which led to the abolition, because they realized we can't keep responding to this. And the Nat Turner Rebellion really scared them. Well, Denmark Vesey, though they were sabotaging and the weather caused them such a situation in that came up in Virginia at that point, that was really the largest number of us involved.
Right.
But because of weather and collaborators and traders, they were found out. And so they looked and says, how long can we stand this? We got to find a new way to enslave. So wage slavery, which followed the so-called emancipation, was the new form of slavery. We don't think of getting wages as being slavery, but wage slavery mean, okay, instead of me taking care of you, we're going to give you just enough for you to take care of yourself while you do the work and labor that we need to done to create the wealth that we need to have. And so we have always resisted. We have never not resisted.
And you mentioned that wage slavery, and we mentioned the prison industrial complex,
which is an extension of chattel slavery.
Exactly. And
when you look at the 13th, yes, sir.
In Brooklyn, I just wanted to bring this up. I want people to notice. In Brooklyn, New York, a borough president by the name of Marty Markowitz, he used to give these, I call them plantation music shows. He used to bring all these super artists to Brooklyn, and this huge space, and he would have these musical renditions and these shows and all of that. All the politicians would come, all the people would come. Do you know, to set up the chairs, people wanted him to hire young people, give them a minimum wage to set up the chairs. He went to the prison and got prison labor and had them in their prison uniforms on, making less than $1 an hour to set up the chair.
Right. But you're talking about someone who is a Zionist, who supports a terrorist state in the Middle East and didn't make no bones about it, who was a part of the terrorism, the economic terrorism in New York against people of color, particularly African-American peoples. Because people don't see economics as terrorism, but economics is the most fundamental of the terrorist instruments. That's what defines capitalism and what it does. Everything else are the tools they use. And so when we can understand that clearly, that you have a group of banks and you have banking families and you have certain corporations, and they've created certain subdivisions that they control, and through financing the people to run for these artificial government instruments like city councils and state representatives, so forth, they finance these people to make the rules, regulation, and enforce the laws that keep them in power. And until we begin to understand, I like the term, I think y'all coined that term, all politics is local. Started hearing it a few years ago, that we have to understand that at the most local level, we've got to take control. When I tell people, I was a PTA president for 7 years. at different schools. That was just trying to be involved. I remember I worked very closely with Lumbe Brath and his wife in the school board elections when I lived in Harlem. We challenged the system. And we found that when we were running the school board elections, we were up against the union. The union were bringing in people that didn't even live in Harlem to run against us. So we began to understand that this whole thing at the local level, the city council level, the area policy board level, the community board level, the PTA level, that's where you have to seize power.
That's right.
If you're going to control higher power.
That's right.
And so this is the level where you can affect those who are doing that school to prison pipeline process that has been going on since the 13th Amendment was passed.
That's right.
If we go back to what happened in Galveston, Texas, that wasn't a freedom move. Okay.
Right.
That was not a freedom move. That was the United States trying to make sure they take control of Texas. All right. And so part of taking control of Texas is to remove the free labor force. And when they went into Galveston. And the first thing they told the brothers and sisters when they came into Galveston, yeah, you free, but you got to stay on the plantation that you on when we came down and free. And they're going to pay your wage, but you got nothing to do with negotiating your wage. And if we catch you off the plantation, that's when they passed one of the first vagrancy laws. If we get off of the plantation, we're going to arrest you, put you in jail, and then lease you back to the plantation. And prison leasing became a big part of the Southern labor force between 1865 and 1945. It still is. Prison leasing is still used. Angola still exists in Louisiana. And many other penitentiaries of that size. So that's why we need to study history. You know, it'll enlighten you that you're not as free as you think you are.
That's right.
And you have more cause to fight and resist today than we've ever had as a cause to fight and resist.
That's right. And that's why we're looking at all areas that we could resist. And one of the biggest challenges we have in this 21st century is the neo-colonial Black puppets of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
We look at people like Hakeem Jeffries and Eric Adams, Letitia James here in New York, but all over the country, these neo-colonial puppets that are being placed in front of us, given resources and power. Dr. King called them, what did he call them? Manufactured leaders.
And that's what they are. And that is a strategy we see across the continent of Africa. We see it in the communities in Europe. You know, I do a lot of things in the UK and in Germany with brothers and sisters in the diaspora. And we see the same rise of these manufactured leaders to keep us in check.
That's right.
You know, and in the United States, they've perfected it. If you watch even the thing that the president of Ghana did at the United Nations, which was commendable, but I think they should have placed a lot more emphasis on the Durban Accords than Lynching, which would have given people a historical foundation to understand where this all coming from.
That's right.
But if you look at who was chosen to represent the African American, Trump, Sharpton, and some dude from the Black Caucus. We don't know nothing about who made those choices on our behalf. These people were not Pan-Africanists. They were not people who were part of the reparation struggle. How did they get to be the element that was representing us in a worldwide projection of reparations? And so we see that happening across the country every day. But the way we can do the fight against it, we just use the tools we have. You two use it very well. We can use electoral politics if we come from a place of principle. And come from a place where we understand the political contradiction in capitalism, so we can seize local control and take away the tools that the national elected official have to dominate the local population.
That's right.
But it takes work. We have to learn how the electoral process work at the local level. I mean, the average brother and sister don't realize to get on a ballot, you need a petition. The average person who even carry a petition don't know there is a bunch of little rules and laws of how you even bind the thing, how the name goes, how to.
That's
So
right.
we need this type of political education at the local level, so we can begin to understand how to seize power. Because at the end of the day, you've got to take control of economic policy.
We lost him.
Now I'm back. Something I didn't do that.
Okay, we can't see you. Oh, there you go.
I didn't do either of that. Nothing is touching
The message is
my
strong.
I think it's too strong. They can't handle
I'm
it.
saying, okay, they have the ability to cut us off. That's deep. But that's okay. They can never stop us. They can never stop our resistance. They can never stop our thrust.
I want to talk a bit about, in the few minutes we have left, everybody's talking about this meeting Hakeem Jeffries had with Jared Kushner. They were together in a law firm, Paul Weiss law firm. They were together in the law firm. They joined together on that First Step Act. And that bill was to increase the privatization of prisons. And it was only releasing the non-white collar crimes, because Jared's father, Charles Jared, was a convicted felon. And he was out, and Trump was appointing him to stuff. But these bills that they have now, there are over 2 million people incarcerated in America. It's only 249 million Americans. China has a population of 1.4 billion, and only 1.7 million are incarcerated, much, much lower percentage. So talk a bit about how they try to use these neo-colonial puppets to justify bills to increase the privatization of the prison industrial complex.
Right. It's the privatization for the purpose of controlling the African population.
That's right.
The main population that challenged capitalism is the African population in America. And that is a population whose history forced them to do this. We were enslaved in this thing. And so how do you continue slavery? How do you continue political tyranny on a people, but make it look like justifiable law enforcement? And that's what they've been doing with these bills. We remember the 3 strikes and you're out was totally illogical.
That's right.
Totally illogical. Were you going to say that I'm going to put a 18-year-old in jail because he has 3 felonies, no matter what those felonies were? This is some impoverished kid from a community who stole something out of a store when he was 14, who may have gotten in a fight and had a knife or something when he was 17, and who got into another, and I'm going to put him in prison for life. I mean, that is going back to chattel slavery at the highest level. There are more of us in prison today than was in slavery at the time of emancipation, so-called. Now, they say 4,000, but it wasn't 4 million, but it wasn't 4 million. Almost 1 million of us had already gotten out. And they're counting that in the numbers that were still in. It was close to 2.7 million. Well, right now, they've got almost that much of us in prison or in the probation parole system, which is bigger than the number that's in prison. And that itself is an extension of imprisonment. So we talk about something close to 5 million Black people involved in that total system. Because you can't get housing, public housing. You can't get jobs because you've got this felony. You can't go to college and get student loans and student assistance because you have this felony. So they've restricted you that the only corridor you have is to engage in crime and come back into the system. So they use you for 2 things. One, they use you to keep the tyranny and control going in the Black community so it can't defend and raise itself. And then they use you to get they use the prison to keep you out of that part of the system that would resist them. If you notice, most of the brothers and sisters that are in jail, because they're in jail for social resistance, everybody wasn't resisting with arms. Somebody, most of our people have resisted because they've rejected social rules and conduct that was oppressive to them. But the rejection of those social rules and conduct usually means someone's going to call the police and you're going to get arrested. And even if it wasn't a felony, by the time they charge you with resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, disturbing the peace, you've got 3 felonies that you didn't even commit. And if you look at the records, you'll find that tens of thousands of these are meted out every year to people who are totally innocent of them. But now you've got 2, 3 felonies and you in prison are waiting for 2 years just to go on trial.
That's right. Okay. Well, Doctor, we got about 5 minutes left. I want you to talk a bit more about Durban, because some of the things that happened in Durban, it was 121 countries that signed on to the document that the United Nations called on racism. And the December 12th movement and Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party and the Black United Front, they all went. And now slavery retroactively is considered a crime against humanity.
Yes.
Now it can be treated as such retroactively because of that Durban move.
Right. And I miss Durban because my mom passed the week before. And so I had to go to South Carolina. But knowing and seeing the booklet that was published immediately thereafter, which I should have found it this morning, but knowing the leadership that the D12 gave and many of the other revolutionary formations from North America and the Caribbean, but particularly those formations from North America, particularly D12, what happened at the UN was simply a validation by the General Assembly of what had happened 20-something years earlier in Durban. Almost word for word, that declaration was made.
That's right.
But it did not get a vote in the General Assembly. And so what happened in the General Assembly was really a validation of the Durban Accords.
That's right.
I would have wished that was said with all the historians. I was there that day. There were some fantastic historians there that did a very good job, but none of them really mentioned the Durban Accords in that kind of context. So people could see the evolution. And then that would have begged the question why the D12 and the other liberation movements weren't there.
Right.
As a part of that process.
Right.
But what we did in South Africa was to get the UN to agree that this was a crime against humanity. To get the UN committee to agree and put it in writing. This wasn't something we said, yeah, and raise our hands to. This is put in writing. The only thing that didn't happen, the committee from the UN didn't take it back before the General Assembly. What the president of Ghana did actually was simply took almost word for word the accords before the General Assembly and got the vote that he got. And I commend him. I don't know what all of his motivations was. I know that this had been addressed for about a year before the African Union, but we know some of the motivation is to soften, and people don't quite understand it, soften our view of the new neocolonialism and not paying attention, right? Because it looked like, oh yeah, we're making this move and they're applauding us. No, they're not. They're plotting against us.
That's right.
Okay. The new neocolonialism and the new imperialism is hard afoot in trying to take over Africa. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund were the primary tools. Well, the Sahel group showed we don't need those tools.
Right. That's right.
And other African nations are beginning to listen to the Sahel group because they're looking and go like, hell, they're developing.
That's
and
right.
They're not taking these loans. They're developing and they don't have somebody else determining the strength of their currency. And so I was surprised to see Ghana the other day sign a defense pact with Burkina Faso.
Oh,
I know they had signed earlier, they had done a lot of economic pieces and transportation protection of goods crossing borders. So because Burkina is landlocked, but they get good support. So they had a whole thing where they can come into Tima, the main port in Ghana. But they now have to sign a mutual defense pact that says if somebody attacks one, it attacks both. That's a big step for Mahama.
Big step.
And I'm hoping other ECOWAS group see that and make that kind of move.
Chad might be moving in that direction.
Yeah, we've watched them coming. I have a lot of good comrades in Chad, and so I've been paying attention to Chad. And if Chad makes that move, and Togo was also trying to make that move.
That's right.
And that coup attempt in Benin. The brothers were trying to make their move, but then the French and the Americans came in and spoiled that coup. But we know that the young people are moving that way. We know that many of the young military men is tired of this thing, and they're trying to find ways to topple these. They're not even dictators. There's something less than that. That we have running many of our nations, and they're nothing more than puppets. Because this guy in Cameroon isn't running anything.
Nothing.
The guy in Gabon is not running anything. The French and the British and the Americans is running it. And in many of these countries, we'll see that's where the drone bases are.
That's right.
That's in Africa, which Mr. Obama placed there.
Right.
You know,
we're going to have to end it there. We run out of time, but it's always great. And we're always going to have you coming back again and again. I don't think you ever repeated yourself. It's always something new, wealth of knowledge. But we're out of time, and this has been
peace and blessings.
Always.
You are our royal family. You've set the model. I beat you by about 10 years. I'm 55 years married. High school sweetheart.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. Blessings.
Well,
but y'all are right there next door. But y'all are youngsters compared to me and Carol.
That's up to you. I'm going to count each one of my years as 2 or 3 so I can catch up.
Thank you so much for being our special guest. And
thank you, my dear.
And you've enlightened us and opened our mind and given us the opportunity to even explore further what our history is so that we can make plans for how we're going to move forward. And we do want to encourage those of you who are viewing to look in your area to see if there might be some. We know that there is quite a few, one in Atlanta regarding the Durban conference that took place 25 years ago, as well as in New York. So check your area and see if there might be something that you might want to go and support.
And as we say each and every week, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer.
Absolutely. Black power.